Okay, okay. Hi, everyone. Good morning. Welcome to the Africa STEM Summit, day three. Today, we are going to be looking into no now USQL, now you don't, led by Gordrick Martin. This is a great session, especially for the backend developers, to know how to navigate databases and especially how to navigate SQL. So I won't even talk much because I really don't know what he has prepared, but I am eager to see what he's able to talk about. Yes, so let us start off. So welcome, Godric. You can take over.
Hi everyone. My name is Gordrick Martin. Just do a quick introduction. Um, my name is Gordrick Martin. I'm a backend engineer working at a startup in Nairobi called Leta. I've been a backend engineer for 6 years now, having risen up from junior to now. I'm the lead backend engineer. I'm in charge of the platform and DevOps teams. Passionate about technology, passionate about education, and yeah, looking forward to sharing a few thoughts on the same. So I think I'll just go. So let's do a quick introductions. What exactly are ORMs? Probably heard about what people speaking about ORMs starting up when you're doing when you're starting to learn about web development and engineering in general. So basically, ORMs are just object relation mapping. So this is a way to communicate with a system uh, without using the native language. So, as an example, in this case, we're talking about an SQL database, Postgres, MySQL, Cassandra. So you want to communicate or attach your backend application to that native system without going into learning SQL. So that's what ORMs are built for. So they help you to build or to bridge that gap between your object-oriented programming, whether that's a Django app, whether that's Java, and your relational database. So some basic components here, you have your models where you define your object. So whether this is a user object or the one that most backend engineers start working on, the notes app. So if this is a note, you define it on a notes app. Then you have your queries. How do you select? So do you go select? So notes dot users notes. If you want to select a user's notes, so users dot notes ID user ID is one, user ID is two. Then you have your migration. So easy to run and make changes on the actual database by writing migration. So if you make a change to a notes app and say add a new column called created date or updated date, then you run a migration and then that column appears on your database. So as example, some popular ones I've already spoken on the Django ORM, which is I think the most common example people have interacted with. There's SQL Alchemy as well, which is in Python. There's GoRM, even though GoRM is not exactly an object-oriented programming language, but there's also GoRM, which is the example I'll use today. So what are some of the advantages of ORMs? I remember when I was starting out in engineering, I first started learning data science. So I was working on SQL, I was working on NumPy, some SciPy stuff. So I had SQL background coming into backend engineering. But then that's not the case for most engineers. Most engineers start learning a language, Python, Ruby, Java, and then they start building applications. You don't ORMs help you to abstract that functionality, so you do not have to go into the database specific, learning SQL. So helping you concentrate more on, like, if it's your notes app, understanding, okay, what's the business logic, or let's say application logic here. If someone creates a note, it's sent. If someone deletes a note, this is done. Also helps you to align with modern programming convention. So you you have all your logic on the in an object oriented way, and also there's productivity. You don't have to, the code is reusable. So if it's selecting a node, selecting a user, just go user dot select, or user dot where id is, and then it's, as opposed to writing a full SQL example of select all from users, and we look at a couple of examples of that. um, there's better security for your web app. So might or might not have heard about SQL injection attacks, where someone is able to, if you don't sanitize your inputs, someone is able to input malicious data into your database. So having ORMs, there's potentially more secure web apps. There's easier migrations. Um, Having worked as an engineer for a while, managing migrations, even with ORMs, is definitely like one of the uh, bigger or like larger tasks. So whenever you make a mistake, whether it's on Django or Go or Java, and then you migrate that mistake onto your database, and then you want to go back and understand. It's a very tedious process to actually manage your migrations and keep your database in sync with what you're trying to do in your application. So our REMs make this much easier. Um, so we won't really look at raw SQL because this is not necessarily like a data science topic. But then raw SQL is just basically that you are interacting with your database directly. So if you want to, if it's like you want to create a user, you go create user. If you want to update, if you want to select a user from the system, you actually write raw SQL for your application, the logic that you're looking for on that. So what are some of the advantages of this? So an advantage I'm seeing with the raw SQL is you get fine-grained like performance and optimization. So in some cases, you find the query that's generated by your ORM code is not the most optimal way to get the information you're looking for. So when you have raw SQL, you're able to control that optimization uh, as to the level that you're looking for in your database queries, as opposed to when this is abstracted and you only get to access it through the ORM. You also get to, when you're using a, the native language of that system, of the SQL system, you're able to get some database specific features that are not really available on the ORM. So with Postgres as an example, when you're writing raw SQL for Postgres, you're able to access things like PostGIS, which might not be available on your ORM. There's better performance again, as I've said, when you're writing complex queries. So there's some example of queries we'll look at. Maybe you want to do some joins on your database, so you're able to say, okay, maybe let me not join the whole table, like left join one table to the other table. You're able to write specific and say, joining with get me this specific fields, or get me this specific columns. um, there's direct mapping of application logic to database, so you get to understand, okay, if this is my notes app, when I do a delete, or when I do a get of list the notes that I have for the user, how does that map to a Postgres query? So that's the select, or that's the delete. So you're able to understand the mapping of those. So in looking at both, they both do and haven't done the disadvantages, because we there's there's benefits to both. And so when you're comparing like project complexity and requirements, ORMs are suitable for simpler projects. So when you're doing a simple, like a CRAD app or a weather app, you don't really need to go into the nitty gritty of writing raw SQL. So if you need to spin up an app quickly, maybe this is an MVP, and this is something we've done even at Letter where I work. When you're building our MVP, we didn't need to go into writing SQL. So we just use the Django ORM, built an MVP, and then once the project starts to scale, when you're moving up to like now starting to do 10, 15,000 deliveries a day, up to now we've done I think like 2 million deliveries total. We needed to now fine tune that. And then that's the point where we started going into, okay, while we're using this ORM, what are the performance implications on our platform or on our system? And then using that information, we started to fine tune it. There's also, it's a gentler learning curve. Again, for beginners and new engineers, you don't really, because SQL, and I've seen this in some of the queries we've written. SQL can be, it can be complex on its own as a language. There's regex in SQL, there's for loops, there's while loops, there's ifs and else. So it can be a bit of a learning curve getting the same functionality you get once you know just Python or Go, and transferring the same to your raw SQL. Performance, I've spoken on this. ORMs may be slower, especially for larger data sets. Generally, with ORMs, if you use them plainly, or like if you use them simply as they're built, you get some cases where it's selecting everything and then it's filtering post selection. But then it's with your raw SQL, it's you are able to do more complex queries and without impacting performance. um, Database schema complexity, simple. ORMs, it's simple to make changes. So once you do your model file, you just, if it's Python, if it's Django, manage.py, migrate. If it's as opposed to like raw SQL where you have to write actual SQL schema files for the updates. Um, Need whenever you need database specific features, MySQL, Postgres, some of them might be lacking on the specific ORM you're using, and you need to actually go into raw SQL. Okay, so having spoken about the two and in comparison with the two, what I recommend and what I see most people doing is having a hybrid approach where to start your application, or when you're building, you just use the tools at hand and the skills at hand. So if it's Python, if it's Go, if it's Java, use that's those specific tools while you start, and then as you scale, and I'll show you an example of how to scale that. As you scale, you start thinking of, I'm getting latency on this specific endpoint. What what ORM code is running for that specific endpoint? So then you begin to think, okay, instead of using the ORM specified way of getting data for this endpoint or for updating at this endpoint, then we can start writing raw SQL to improve performance for that point. In that way, you get to you get to see the advantages of both, uh, as as you start and then also as you scale. And also for a backend engineer, SQL skills do come in handy sometimes. So it's one of those things that you might want to add to your tool belt as you grow as an engineer, and as you progress in your career. Okay. before I go into like code examples, is there any questions on this? Okay, let me share. So this is an example of application I have running. So let me just stop it and then rerun, and then we can see. Okay, I'll do a request here. So this is it's a Go app, the RPC. Just doing a quick demo. You don't really have to understand specifics of Go, but I'll be able to see some of the things we're talking about for the demo. Um, So this is, I'm using Gorem, one of the ORMs for Go, and some of the logic, like you see here, I'm selecting from a user, where email is the email I'm using to log in. Then there's the functionality to, you can be able to preload your database where, and this is the preloading happening because I'm selecting from users, but then it's automatically preloading for me from permission groups, permissions, and then it's selecting from users, it's selecting from roles. So all this logic is simply from line 411. If you check here on the auth service, line 411, where I'm selecting the user, all the logic, all this SQL where it's selecting permissions, it's selecting the roles, all this logic comes into play from this selecting user db dot where. If you're doing this with raw SQL, then I would have had to write my specific logic. So it would have gone something like I would have had like a SQL file where I'm writing update, uh, select user, select roles, insert to login trains, update users. But then using Guarem helps me to abstract that functionality. And then, as you can see, some of these queries, and there's already, I'm getting a warning here, slow SQL, slow SQL. This is a legacy version of this app, but we fixed fixed a lot of it up. So we are getting slow SQL here, and because I do not have the specific control at this point, I did not have or do not have the specific control to optimize some of these queries. So, like selecting from permissions, I would have just joined joined it like permissions, permission groups, roles, and users into one select query, and probably like optimize that. So that's showing an example of that case where you start off with what you have, and then as you scale, you as you scale, you optimize the system using raw SQL. And then finally, a tool that I like to use for this is SQL Commenter. SQL Commenter is a way, is an It's developed in Google, and you can use it on your cloud, AWS, Google Cloud. So you add this to, let's look at Django, for example. You add this uh, to your code, and then let me see. You add this to your code, and then you're able to tell what it's an inbuilt feature for GoRM, but for Django, the ORM, and probably made like more other specific ORMs, the examples are here. You may not be able to tell what specific query is running when I run this part of the ORM. So once you're able to add this to your code. This is another example with Go. You add it to your request, and then you're able to get the specific query, and then use that as a starting point for your optimization or your database optimization. So this works. You can use this locally. You can use this on cloud, as I've mentioned, and there's multiple languages supported. There's Spring, there's Node, Ruby. So I'll add this to the slide as well, and then if anyone you want to check that out for when you're building your own applications, you can do so. And yeah, so finally, I'm just going to put up my contacts. So if anyone wants to chat about this later, I know we'll be meeting in tech forums and whatnot. Those are my contacts. If you want to chat about this specific talk, or want to talk about backend engineering or tech career, you can always give me a shout, and we can catch up over some coffee. Thank you.
Godric, you're done?
Yeah, I'm not seeing how like questions. How do you do like questions? And, hello?
Godric, are you done?
Yeah, I'm done. I'm asking. Can
Oh,
you
okay, great.
can
So I
you
think we can finalize the session there. So thank you, Godric, for your time. And thank you for all who are able to join. Bye bye.